Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened there.
Back in the room.
But I
You're
could
back in the room.
genuflect and I could do something that would make it look like I was doing some big spiritual performance. But the reality is the physics were just the physics. I had something that generates a waveform of a particular length and causes the molecules inside that gruel or stew to vibrate and resonate at a high rate and causes heat. There's no great mystery about it, but you don't understand it because you haven't been taught all the basics to get there. A lot of what's going on here is there is a real physics. And by the way, the other thing is, if you're looking at, say, advanced civilization, some place out, in time away from the current world we live in, or in location, some nearby planetary system or something. If they were just 100 years ahead of us, or 1,000, would they be transferring power on a electric copper cable? Would they be transferring power via laser microwave transmission system, or is there other systems which we couldn't even imagine today that 50 years or 100 years from now is the way you transfer power, energy? So are we even looking in the right places? It's like when we were talking about looking for intelligent life. So we're looking for radio waveforms with big antennas. Well, would some advanced cultures send stuff at the speed of light? Are they limited to that, or do they figure out other ways to communicate and transmit? So you're looking in the wrong area for the information. And if you understand that speed of light's not the limit, and you know where you got to look, and eclipses concentrate or obfuscate other things that make it hard to see that signal, then or the effect, then maybe you build stuff around those events. And that's I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's people following the eclipses around. It's not completely crazy. And then people anticipating and planning even alignments of cities, or trying to make a statement even hundreds of years in advance, may not be as crazy as it sounds, anticipating what was coming some point in time. So the mysteries around us are unbelievable, where these secret societies have pre-planted with ideas, certain things that they wanted to say and do and build around in anticipation of certain moments. Look, even the birth of Prince William, that was anticipated for hundreds of years. I'm very serious. He was planned around. There was a breeding program. It's called the Knights of the Round Table, where all the families work together, merging their DNA, planning who was going to align with who in order to have children that had the correct DNA. That's why in this countdown to Prince William's birth, each knight of the round in the Order of the Garter is given a number. And what's Prince William's number of being knighted to sit at the round table? Well, he's the 1,000th knight in the numbers, gematria. The zero usually doesn't mean anything in most of the systems. You don't count it because it's a nothing. So he's the 1,000th knight of the round table? No, he's the one. Like the movie Independence Day was a countdown to the one. Okay. And so there's a secret society aspect that was in play for hundreds of years in a breeding program. And what has he got? He's got the Saxe-Coburg-Goethe bloodline, and he's got the Merovingian bloodline through Diana. And all the other bloodlines were reduced down to those two key ones. And then he's the first royal in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, probably all the way back to Cain, because they're the children of the Cains, or kings of the earth. He's the first one, probably all the way back to Cain in their mind, but at least in hundreds of years in other people's calculations, to have the blood of all 13 families of the bloodline families. Why 13? Because it's the 12 Abrahamic lines plus Cain, and 13 bloodlines, and they have the right to rule by blood, is what their belief is. It's a cult, it's a religion, and then they do certain events around celestial events like eclipses. You'll see the royals from different families going to places where eclipses are at to gain power. Look, Prince William was born during an eclipse. Well, how did that happen? It wasn't an accident. That's what Deanna was trying to tell you. She was innocent, naive. She was just a breeder. She didn't even understand her role till she was put in that place. It's very frustrating. And then had to go along. She had pressures from every angle. Go look at it. Read the work of Cal Donnie, Kal, first name and then last name Donnie, Dani, the occult numbers of Prince William. I've mentioned it many times before. Go look at it again. You have Merlins, wizards that have manipulated events to make it look as though it's acts of God to have things occur with exacting precision a certain way. And then they take the energy from those events, from those occurrences, and their ability to manipulate times and seasons and events to their power, like a gardener, plants and cultivates and, does certain things in order to get, a hybrid plant of a particular nature that does certain things, grows in cold or warm environments with lots of water or less, to get just the right combination to suit their purposes. So they're doing the same thing with people. They're doing the same thing with societies. That's what the powerful, the elite are doing across the whole planet. They're trying to manipulate the masses and cull the herd and take out the ones that are a problem so they can farm society to do what they want to do. They want to farm their fellow man like slavers did. The ones that'll be the most manipulable and docile and do their will, the ones that are more interesting to them sexually, or even for food. And then the rest of them, they want to, it's a genocidal manipulation to own the future. Who's going to inherit the earth, inherit the world? And if you're naive about it, ignorance is bliss. But right up until you're the sacrifice. So that's the world that we live in. And either you can be blind to it, or you can, there's a scripture that says, those that choose to be ignorant suffer because of it. If you choose, I just don't want to know. I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to, it's too complicated. I just want to enjoy life. I just want to, watch my TV show, play my game, go to work and get paid and be able to get food at the grocery store. Those that don't want to be bothered knowing too much, it says they suffer because of it. They don't understand they're being farmed. That's the scary part for us here that do see this, is the extent of the propaganda being used to control and manipulate, and the imminent nature of the moment we're in, where this bridging moment. Can we get through the next 20 or 30 years to the paradise moment that technology can bring to us relatively intact? Or in this advanced technological AI um, elite moment, will we be cultivated out? Will we be weeded out? Will we become fertilizer for these people out into the generations as they take over the world in their Nazi-esque perfect society mentality as they take over the world? That's China's the example there. In China, several times over the last couple thousand years, they've killed off the population to the 90th percentile and weeded it down just to certain families in order to control the future. Literally genocide to the 90th percentile. What would genocide in the modern era look like to the 90th percentile? That's what the Georgia Guidestones was all about. Weeding down the human population where 13 out of 14 people alive must die, and only a half a billion people, 500 million, would remain on the earth to repopulate the earth. That's why it had to be destroyed. We cannot allow them to have this statement in stone and accept it. We will not accept their plan that there should only be 500,000 people on the earth, or 500 million people on the earth, and that's the carrying capacity of the earth, and the rest need to be decided. And to the extent that your listeners and these audiences grasp that this terror moment that we're in, and then realize there is faces behind it. It's not just an AI. There's people pulling the levers with the AI. They're just augmented by soulless machines that are telling them how to weed the earth of the unnecessary people, of which most of your audience fall in that category. And are you going to rage against the machine or not? You're going to stand for it? You're just going to accept it? You're going to leave their monuments in stone against you standing, or are you going to take them on?
Exactly. Talking of all of those types of things, Juan, so something President Trump said, I did a great show just a few days ago with Gene Decode, and President Trump said a phrase that makes me think of something.
Who did you do the show with? Who did you do the show with?
Gene Decode.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
And so something President Trump said, he was at I believe it was one of the UFC bouts, and the Nelk boys, they're big YouTubers, they were with him. They were there in the same facility, and he's done shows with them before. They've come to Mar-a-Lago, and he pointed at them and he said, "These guys are monsters." And he said, "You wouldn't, it's hard to believe." And it made me think of usually when me and you talk, one of the phrases you like to use is say, "Well, I'm putting all the monsters in the boxes," like. And so anyway, me and Gene did a great show about a number of things, and he brought to mine and the audience's attention about Abraham Lincoln. And there's a film, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, and I've heard of it. I haven't watched it, but I didn't really think too much of it. Anyway, Gene brought to my attention and the audience about how that's actually based on some reality. And then I thought about this with President Trump with the Nelk boys, and he said, because nothing that President Trump says is by mistake, and he points to them and says, "These guys are monsters." And he said, "It's hard to believe, isn't it?" And then just carried on, just right there in front. And then I looked up on YouTube. They've actually commentated on vampires before. They've talked about it. And if you do the numbers on Nelk boys, it comes to 103, which comes to vampires. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And I wanted to know if you have any thoughts about that. Gene was saying that there's places around the world with vampires, etc. You talked about the transgender part. You've got Transylvania with Dracula and like the impact, all that stuff. But just some thoughts about that. This is the other thing he put into the mix, which was really fascinating. He said that it goes all the way back to Judas Iscariot. And he said because of what Judas did to Christ with betraying him for the 30 pieces of silver, that's why vampires traditionally are known as being allergic allergic to silver. And I hadn't put any of those pieces together before, but I just wondered if you had any thoughts or commentary on that, on some of the things that Gene had shared with us the other day.
Well, I don't know that tying it to the 30 pieces is exactly right. The silver is a natural antiseptic. That's why it could be used for money. You could have silver and pass it between people, and there could be bacteria, viruses, etc. And on the silver, they die very quickly. And so silver was a preferred um, uh, coinage for money because of its antiseptic nature. And then it's you can get it into small quantities for minor transactions, gold for bigger transactions, which also has a monatomic antiseptic nature, but it's actually not as good as silver is. And so, I think that's, the vampires not wanting to be sterilized or whatever with their, demon genes and all that sort of thing. The thing about Judas, Judas was part of this cult, this group that was against the Romans, who had assisted another sect of the Jews in building the temple, rebuilding the temple. And there is actually an interesting correlation to what's going on in the world today that people should slow down and listen for a second here. So think about this. The temple, the Romans kind of supervised the rebuilding of the temple in the time prior to Christ being born. When Christ went to the temple where the Word of God, the Torah, the Mosaic scriptures, and other writings were present and being read to the people and like that in these, weekly services, he did go there. He, considered it the house of God and all the various things. But it is interesting with this sect that was of Judas. They were kind of like the militia crowd or something within the various groups. And they believed that the Messiah had to come to save the Jews from the Romans. And so they were looking for some kind of a military leader to come lead the people in a God-backed campaign to destroy the occupying armies out of the area. And Judas, the others were fishermen. There were people from around the area of Galilee, and Judas was actually from a little different area. And so he came from a different kind of a mentality. When Christ came from having resurrected, what's his name from the dead there?
Lazarus.
Lazarus joined the entourage, and this is 40 days out of Jerusalem on this walk back to Jerusalem. Messengers came to this traveling entourage that's around Jesus, arguably several dozen at least, probably 1 to 500 people. It just kept growing, this caravan, because of all the miracles and things like that would come and walk along with him. So messengers came from Lazarus because he was a frequent guest at Lazarus' house. They were close friends and told him that he was very ill, near death. And they thought that Christ would come running to help his friend Lazarus. Instead, he continued at a modest pace, headed towards Jerusalem, and came to Lazarus's city, and they said, "You're too late. You're too late. He's already been dead for 3 days. You slowpoke. If you'd only come. I mean, you're such good friends with him. Why didn't you hurry up?" And Christ hadn't hurried. He hadn't he tarried along the way. He got there and he says, "Well, where's he buried?" "Oh, he's in the tomb." "Roll back the rock." No, don't roll back the rock. It stinks. He's been dead for 3 days. He's gonna stink to high heaven. Are you kidding? And but Christ has him roll back the rock, and then he cries out, "Lazarus, come forth!" And then everybody's shocked. Out of the tomb comes Lazarus, dressed in his, they had wrapped up like a mummy, and it'd be an amazing Hollywood scene. And he's resurrected. And he has this, no doubt, people have near-death experiences. What do you suppose Lazarus' near-death experience was like? What kind of stories would he have to tell? Well, he joins the entourage on their walk back to Jerusalem, where Christ had been a couple times for the Passover. And along the way, even, by the way, and I'm going somewhere with this, so I want to just kind of get people in the right mindset. And people might not have heard me say this before. Along the way, he was so direct in talking to the disciples that he said that he would have to suffer and die at the hands of the Romans and of the Jews in Jerusalem, etc., and that he would be, dead and resurrected himself. And they didn't understand what he was talking about completely, but at least one of them understood. Peter said, "No way! We won't let it happen. I won't. You be tormented and suffer and die. I'll protect you." And Christ had to rebuke him. No, it's necessary. It's part of God's plan that this is what has to happen, and you're not going to get in the way of it. And he was very direct with the apostles about what was going to happen. They were going there, and there was going to be drama. But Lazarus was there to talk about the afterlife and things like that, because he's traveling along with the entourage. Then when he gets to Jerusalem, he comes in on the donkey. You look at Judas, he's expecting that Christ is going to come in as this conquering hero if he's the true Messiah, because he had a preconceived understanding of what the scriptures said about a conquering Messiah coming to destroy all the enemies of the children of Abraham who were promised the land, the Jews, if you will. And his preconceived idea of a conquering, general to come wipe out the enemies didn't include a guy sitting on a donkey and riding into Jerusalem with people throwing palm fronds down on the street and, hailing him as a king. With the miracles and everything else, he expected angels to come out of the air with flaming swords, destroy all their enemies, and they're going to have some great apocalypse, and then he'd sit on the throne, and all the other nations of the earth would cower. And then on top of that, Christ went to the temple then the next day, hung out, watched observed everything going on at the temple. And depending on which account, whether you're reading the biblical accounts or some of the extra biblical accounts and letters from people from the time, because we have lots of information that's out there that's not necessarily the Bible, but that give you kind of a picture of what those events were like. And Christ on this next day comes in, and it says he fashioned a whip, and he observed the money changers in their business all day. And then when he completed fashioning this whip, he goes into this area of all the vendors where they had like a bazaar, a market right outside the temple. And the Passover is when you would bring sacrifices and offer them to God for sin. So we know that, for example, going back to the Garden of Eden, and we're going somewhere with this about a present day situation that everybody needs to kind of understand. But for those that may not have thought this through, or even if you have, I want you to kind of get your mind in the right place of how this fits even today. As Christ comes in and he casts out all the market people, the vendors, the people that were buying and selling animals. And you'd come in and you'd bring your lamb that you'd been growing all year, and it's going to be a sacrifice to God for sin, to make you right with God. And it's symbolic. Everybody knows it's symbolic, by the way. They know that the lamb cannot reconcile them with God directly. You can't give a lamb to pay for whatever offense you've made to God. It's symbolic. Going all the way back to Cain and Abel. When Adam and Eve sinned, Eve was beguiled, but Adam knew what he was doing when he sinned, when he turned against God. And so, because he was smarter, he was older, when they sinned, what did God do? As he expelled them from the garden, he killed animals and he clothed them in the dead animal's carcass. He gave them a covering, and he didn't give them fig leaves. They were there naked, and grabbed fig leaves and says, how'd you know you were naked? What happened? They lost their cloth of light, whatever it was that their understanding was prior to that. So he clothed them in dead animal skins, dead carcasses, and they left, were cast out of the garden. So there was animal death right from the beginning, and they were clothed in death. And you asked the question, by the way, did they eat dead animals in the garden? What was their diet like in the garden? They had anything that had a seed in it. They had the fruits, they had the vegetables, whatever they wanted of the food, but they were herbs, plant life. And then outside of the garden,
I didn't recall the question, but
they
it's a good
were
question.
meat and other things. In fact, part of the whole point is that life out of the garden was somehow manipulated different than it was inside that thing. The nature of the world, the way they had to interact with the world, was completely different. And so when Cain brought his offering, he brought an offering of food, vegetables. When Abel brought his offering to God, it was of his flock, his lambs, and he made a sacrificial offering to God that involved death. And it was symbolic because the payment for sin, which was going against God, was death. It was symbolically, if you're separated from God, God's source of life, if you are separated from the source of life, then you experience death. Death is separation from God. There was some bigger thing going on here. So somehow reconciling ourselves with God was putting something else dead in there to pay the price. And the understanding to Adam was that at some point God himself would provide an adequate sacrifice to pay for the sin in the garden, and then Adam could be reconciled with God. And all of the sacrifices in between were merely symbolic. You were showing faith that God would one day provide a true sacrifice that would be adequate to pay for the penalty of sin, which God had said is death, and God, being perfect, couldn't change whatever the penalty was. it had to be fulfilled. It couldn't be bypassed. A price had to be paid. And so, but then God put on flesh, like we put on a coat, and came and walked among us. So he was born of a woman, and that's the Christ figure, the Messiah, to reconcile and put us back in right relationship with God. So here Christ comes in, and the Jews, including Judas, were looking for a conquering Messiah to reconcile the people with God somehow, and to put all their enemies under their foot, the Romans and any other, people from outside the area that weren't children of the promise, Abraham, to inherit this holy land, etc. What's Christ do? He turns on the very people that Judas thinks are going to be the most favored, the temple people, the people that are running the government of the region, under the Romans' noses, and that they're going to be part of this salvation of the nation as the Jews and the temple leaders all come together around this conquering Messiah figure, this king figure, and the angels come out of heaven and uncloak themselves and drive the Romans from their midst and destroy all the Gentile heathen from the area and purify the land and take it all over. So when Christ drives the temple leaders out of the area, calls them a den of thieves and murderers, and cleanses the temple of all this bazaar of vendors buying and selling animals, and telling people, oh, your animal is not perfect, and go talk to my brother-in-law, he'll sell you one that's perfect, he'll take this one on trade-in, but yours isn't good enough, and running a racket, if you will. Christ says that they're blocking the people from true worship of doing something with God, reconciling themselves with God, a real spiritual experience as opposed to just this manipulated thing. And he destroys their business operation. Shoot, the biggest business day of the year is like, the lead up to Christmas is the Passover week at the temple, and all the families that live around the temple and run the temple operations make the big bucks. They're breeding animals and doves and lambs and cattle and everything else, and all the pilgrimage of people coming into the city for the great festival of Passover, like a Christmas or something, and they show up and they're going to make the whole year's wages, and it's the culmination of the whole operation. And Christ just destroyed that. He just dismantled that in a short while, overturned all the tables, all their money's thrown all over the place, drove them out of the area with the whip. And what else did he do? He freed all the animals, turned them loose. Think about it. He didn't just overturn their, coinage and everything else. All these guys scrambled to get their money, turned all the animals loose that were there for slaughter to be sacrificed. In some of the accounts, it says he stood in the doorway and wouldn't let anyone in or out of the temple area where the animals were. And as he did this and had some participation by other people that were present, and there's some symbology there, no doubt, because why? Because he was supposed to be the sacrifice. And that's what he told the apostles. He was going to be sacrificed like the sacrificial lamb. He was literally saying that he was God's sacrifice. That's why the Jews took such offense to him at different times. You're saying you're God? You're saying that you're God's direct messenger? This is crazy. This is blasphemy. So then, and this is the season we're in, by the way, the day that celebrates that day is Sunday the 24th. And with all these things that week thereafter is all these events, Palm Sunday, Christ coming into the city, and then over the next couple of days, disrupting the city, turning it upside down. So then you come back to Judas. After Judas Judas, or after Christ destroyed their business, I mean, the whole year, whole family operations are built around, and all the temple's revenue for running a temple, even the Roman soldiers and garrisons that are there, because you have this huge influx of people that come in from all the region to that little concentrated area for the Passover, and they don't want an uprising. They don't want a revolution. So they're there to maintain the peace. And Christ just broke the peace, caused total disruption, which is going to get back to Caesar, and he's going to be pissed when he finds out. Because the guy that was running the area before Pilate got kicked out because he couldn't maintain the peace, because you had a bunch of people like Judas's clans that wanted to overthrow the Romans and take over the region. So after Christ disrupts it, who do the temple people go to try and restore order? They understand money. The one sane guy that's kind of in their crowd is Judas. And Judas is the one that, for he carried the bag. He was the treasurer. He does all of the money handling for the apostles. They approach him. They say, look, your master has lost his marbles. And whatever people think about him and all his miracles and everything else, whatever the trick is that he's doing, he can't be, the good guy that you think he is. Look, you're traveling with him. You know the secrets. You know how to heal people and all the stuff he's showing you what to do. But you can't just disrupt the temple operations like this. This is the way that we protect our families, and what the kingdom of God's going to be built on. We just need peace for the rest of the week. We just need to get things back under control. We'll help your operations out, okay? In fact, you'd be a great leader for these people. They look up to you because you're the one that carries the bag. They trust you with the money. The other apostles would probably follow you if there's a problem. So, but you need money. We understand that to run an operation like this and keep everybody happy and keep it moving. We'll give you 30 pieces of silver, enough to manage your entourage and keep it going for a year. And in the meantime, all we need you to do is to direct the Roman soldiers to your master so they get the right guy, pick him up. We're going to put him in jail for a few days till the temple operations are done, maintain peace and order, and then we'll help you out. You could help lead these people through. You're a great leader. You could do this. You understand the military side. You understand the Roman threat. And they talked Judas into it. Now, how do we know all that? We know it from other writings, but even in the scriptures, when they took Christ and then they talked about they wanted to get him crucified, Judas went back to the same people who the silver and says, hey, wait a minute. Look, I was good with arresting him and bringing peace in the neighborhood, kind of working through this with the disciples and all that. I was good with that, but nobody's talking about killing somebody here. I didn't agree to that or crucifying him. Look, he's not that guy. Judas had been embarrassed a bit for various reasons amongst the other apostles by Christ on several accounts. The gal that came to Christ and anointed him with a precious oil, very valuable oil, about a year's worth of wages. Judas had said, why would you let this woman break this jar of expensive ointment and just pour it over your body? That was wasteful. Shouldn't you have had her give it to me? I'd go sell it, or she could go sell it, and then take the money and put it in the treasury, put it in my bag to support the church operations, the entourage's operations. And Christ said she did this, anointing him for burial. And it was a beautiful act before God that Judas didn't understand, which he didn't. He was driven by the money and how are we going to run this business here? He didn't see the spiritual side of this thing. But all of a sudden, when it became real and they're talking about killing Christ, crucifying him, he goes back to the people he made a deal with and says, here, take your 30 pieces of silver back. I wasn't good with that. And they says, no, 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 deal's done. It's your silver. We don't want it. It's tainted money now. It's blood money, and you've received it. It's yours. And Judas, somewhere in there across the sands of time, did he repent? Did he only feel sorry for himself? Was he, you know, what kind of guilt crossed his mind? Was he killing himself because he was no longer looked at the same way by the other apostles who realized he betrayed Christ? Was his betrayal understood and discovered by the other apostles? Did he try to pass himself off as the new leader right up until all of a sudden it's obvious they're going to try and kill Christ? Judas goes out and he kills himself. And the Jews, the temple people, took the 30 pieces of silver and bought the land where he had been killed, probably from one of their other buddies. That was this became a potter's grave area. People that could afford to be buried other places would be buried there. And it was said for generations afterwards that when you went by there, there was a stench in that area that just hung, like, you know, people talk about demon presence and like that, and a stench, a cold will come over an area. And the belief was that it was occupied by filthy, stinking, demonic presences for a long time afterward, because that was what had gotten into Judas's soul, his being, to cause him to betray the Christ, the Son of God. Now, all of that, Tom, to get to this current moment and what's going on in the world right this second, coming up on Palm Sunday. When I was down in Argentina the other day, the president hey, sorry about that. I had a call came in. When I was down in Argentina the other day, the president of Argentina, who just took office, he went over to Israel and spoke over there, was asked by their friends to come over and speak. And he made a statement that was quite, interesting. He talked about how that sacrifices were about to resume at the temple area for the Jews. Now think about that. We're about to resume sacrifices. Do I have you there, Tom, or did I lose you?
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Let's see. Well, I don't see. I just want to make sure that I got you there, bro.
Yeah, I'm here.
Did I lose you, or are you still here?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Here, let me stop and I'll restart here. See if we can get you back.
Okay. I think I was frozen for a little while there. But he'll be back. The crucifixion of Christ, 262. Death is separation from God, 262. The crucifixion, 164. 5th of November, 164. Crucifix, 93. Crucifixion, 131. John F. Kennedy, 131. Crucify, 85. Silver. Crucifying, 115. 11/5. November 5th. Excuse me. May 11th. November 5th. Have a look. Is he back? Not yet. Not yet. He'll be back in. So who's listening? Where is everyone from? Put in the comments where you're from. Any questions for Juan? Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting the connection that Gene made the other day with Judas, with vampires, with punishment that God gave him. Lots of things. Nothing's quite as it seems. In fact, I'm discovering that pretty much nothing is as it seems. That's quite a thought, isn't it? Imagine that. Everything that we thought was the case is probably not. That's really quite a statement, but it's quite mind-blowing. Yeah. Yeah. Oh well. The universe is changing. It's upgrading. The awakening's happening. And we're on the ride. We're on the ride. We're here. So we'll discover as more time goes on, we'll discover more truths, more things. I do think though about truth. Is it all coming from us? Are we observing it? Are we manifesting it? I think we are at some level. In fact, I know we are. But then it's like the paradox of how does that blend into everything else, to this global story. Here he is. Here's Juan. He's back in the room. Yep, he's joining. He's still joining. So it might be a Wi-Fi connection for him. Oh, he's just gone. You're going to try again? Oh, hang on. Where'd he go? Here he is. Juan is connecting to audio. Okay. That's good. Hey, buddy.
Couldn't get it to read.
I can see the palm of your hand.
Got there.
I can see the palm of your hand.
Let's see here. Let's try to get this sorted out.
Cool.
Hold on. Well, let's get it fixed. Hold on.
All right. Take your time.
There.
Okay, I can see just a window pane.
Are you there, Tom?
I'm here, Juan. Yep. That's good. I can see the boots.
All right. Yeah, you can edit that part out. All right. All right.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, if you just edit that out and then let me continue on.
Yeah.
Say
There you
again?
go. Oh, we're ready. I mean, it was just, I did a little bit of commentary and then you reconnected, but everything was okay. So, yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Anyway, let me just finish what I was trying to say there. So, what transpired was that the president of Argentina went over to Israel. And in the course of his conversations in Israel, he's talking about how sacrifices are about to begin again up on the Temple Mount. Now think about this. They're going to start sacrificing animals at the temple in Jerusalem. It's going to be a huge, monstrous public spectacle. Think about that. What is the understanding or impression of people around the world going to be when they see a huge spectacle of animals being brought to the temple on a monthly, weekly, daily basis, whatever, to be sacrificed and make a big deal out of it? How are we going to react to that? And the beginning point is when they have to have the red heifer. There's a whole ceremony around that to, have certain triggers that are put in place that have to be done to, make it legitimate, etc., based on the Mosaic law and all sorts of things. Okay. How is the world going to react to the resumption of a stream of sacrificial animals going to the Temple Mount? And by the way, the question also is it going to be at the site where the old temple was, supposedly, where the Dome of the Rock is currently? Are the Muslims just going to roll over? In fact, there's a whole school of understanding. There's statements all over the place that indicate that the October 7th attack by Hamas was triggered because of statements being made about temple sacrifices are about to resume in Israel. There's a huge spectacle that's about to occur, and if the sacrifices are to resume, is that kind of like when Judas was here, some reversal of that moment where the people doing the sacrifices believe that they're about to usher in a new era of the children of Abraham, the Jews, to have mastery over the rest of their neighbors? Is it literally kind of like that moment when Christ shows up and a certain sect of the Jews believes this is it, and now the conquering Messiah is going to kick out all of our enemies and give us control over this whole region, and we'll be the head, not the tail? Is something like that going to be presented as the new truth as the sacrifices begin in Jerusalem? And for many of the believers involved, within the Judaic and even Christian religions, are they in some type of a propagandized belief that this is the will of God and the timing is perfect? It's going to be preceded by some regional crisis, some world crisis that puts the world on the edge of its seat, but somehow is justified resumption of the sacrifices because it's been prophesied. We all knew it was going to happen, and this is necessary. It's appropriate. It's what God's will is, to resume these sacrifices there on the Temple Mount. The context of this from a messianic perspective is that there's some conquering aspect of this resumption of sacrifices. So are we being propelled regionally inside the Mideast to some kind of a huge war? Is Iran going to be the brunt of this? The other Mideast countries, Egypt itself, Egypt has said if Israel goes into Rafah, that all of the prior agreements going back to the Camp David Accords, return of the Sinai, everything else, all of those agreements are off. If Israel goes into Rafah, deal's off. It doesn't have to be Iran. It could be Egypt and other Arab countries. the Hamas thing, if it's related to the statements that they're getting ready to start sacrificing all over. And then even you got to bring the president of Argentina, the new president, and his in order to get assistance or whatever within Argentina, he has to go over and genuflect to the Jews in Israel and talk about the sacrifice in order for them to be able to get Argentina under control. Who else is going to have to show up and say just the right words and back and be involved in order to make this happen? Some unimaginable global spectacle, series of events is being set up for us to all be part of. And then, by the way, from a Brit perspective, who's the only person alive today that genuinely could take control in some post-apocalyptic moment if we had some kind of a religious war, global war, etc.? According to the way the laws or the rules are written up, remember, the Palestine region was under British control prior to the Balfour Declaration in 1917 with the Rothschilds to begin purchasing land in the Palestine district that ultimately could be made a new nation, and the Jews declared themselves a nation in 1947, 30 years later, and it was recognized by the UN in 1948 as this new nation of Israel. And by the way, just as an aside, a further aside in all of this, let me just add this one thing. Yeah, thank you. Great. I'll send it. Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. That looks outstanding. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Greek salad. So think about this. Who's really trying to do this propaganda fabrication event, etc.? The Rothschilds take credit for the creation of modern day Israel. Are they, from a religious Jewish standpoint, who are they? Many people look at them as being literally having more satanic alignment than modern Judaism or any good guy solid beliefs. Look at the UN, who recognized Israel in 1948. Well, shoot, they were a new creation. UN had just come into existence. The League of Nations had been tried back at World War I era and failed. So the Rockefellers, the brothers, engineered these nations coming together and agreeing to create a new United Nations. And then they picked a site. They were debating within the various families that created this United Nations where to place their world center. And there was a lot of people wanted to put it out in San Francisco, and there was another group that wanted to put it out in New York. And when it was found, there was a site they were looking for. Slaughterhouse factory facility, and but as the city grew, it was too close to the city center for us. So what did they do? They purchased, the Rockefellers family purchased that site of this slaughterhouse that had been there for 150 years, and the new UN building and that whole group was built on that site, where animal sacrifices have been going on for 150 years plus. I think somebody said 153, an interesting number. And if that was the case, or that being the case, and then they recognize Israel right the bat, this country, this newest nation on the planet, and now you have these very elite families taking credit for having got this nation in place. And then in the course of the legal stuff, when the Palestine region was being purchased up by the Rockefeller or Rothschild family, that at some royal could be placed on the throne over Jerusalem from the royal family. Of all the families involved, the only one, wasn't going to be out of Germany or France or the Netherlands or something like that. It was the British royal family. Why? Because the Palestine region was operated by the Brits. And so within the Commonwealth thing, they would be a sovereign over the land. That was the agreement in the fine print in the Balfour Declaration. Well, today, if for some calamitous reason, some bizarre war, conflict in the area, religious war between the three great religions over this Temple Mount site, and sacrifices was to happen to bring peace in the region, there's those that believe that a setup is being done where it would allow for Prince William, the one who represents all 13 bloodline families of the earth, to be seated on the argue, depending on which Christ Messiah, type of an agreement, like a 7-year agreement to like Revelation, to bring peace back to the region and reconcile all the religions. And by the way, the British royal family claims to be bloodline descendants, not just of David, so the Jewish line, not just of Muhammad, the Muslims, but also of Christ through the Merovingians, because they believe Christ had children actually survived the cross and all sorts of bizarre things. And so he would represent all three religions sitting on the throne to bring peace between the three religions as the one representative, the one. Now, all of that, let me give you another little tidbit that's going on right now that I think is interesting. Literally this week, on the 20th, and again on the 24th, there's a worldwide premiere of a movie that a friend of mine put together. And I think it's an excellent movie. I think everybody in this audience should go see it. And that movie is CHRISTSPIRACY. So think of conspiracy, but it's CHRISTSPIRACY. And I'll shoot you over a link, Tom. And it's in 650 movie theaters around the world, and for those 2 days. So happened that it worked out that when these events that I was talking about during the time of Christ occurred, and it's the eating practices that we have all across the world. There's a certain school of thought that's supported by quite a bit of writing, including stuff from the Dead Sea Scrolls and other scrolls that have been uncovered since, that say that Christ did not eat meat. And of course, as soon as you get into that realm, oh my, within Christian, Judaic, Muslim, you've gone somewhere that most people just don't have any time or patience or interest in. The matter's settled. And to speak against eating meat, well, there's all sorts of scriptures, Old Testament and New, that support or appear to support eating of meat. and how to kill an animal correctly, etc. But Cameron Waters, who's one of the directors of the movie, has actually done some pretty good research and has gone through this, and there's this understanding belief that the whole Nazarene thing is actually not what you think it is. Christ, the Nazarene. Well, actually, there's no city of Nazareth. And there was a group of, spiritual people that believed in certain spiritual things that were not the Judas side, looking for the Messiah to come back militaristically, but we're looking for something else, and conquering the earth by peace and not killing and eating animals and all sorts of things like that. And that's a debate that's going to come into the fore, and we'll have to talk about it more later. But in order to have that conversation, I think you have to see this movie, whatever your thoughts are on it, and then that serves as the basis for then this ongoing continuing conversation that we're going to have, not just tiny little groups of audience, but the world's going to be confronted with this whole thing about animal sacrifices, animal slaughter, in the context of the events that are very shortly going to happen, and it will be a huge human public spectacle as we move to this moment. Even the talk, not even the actual event of the beginning of sacrifices again in Israel, but even the talk, which is going to widen out, and the fight over the prospect of animal sacrifices resuming in Jerusalem, and where that happens, and with the animals that are going to be used, and the rituals involved, and then out into the rest of society worldwide over, look, the health of the planet. Let me wrap it up by putting one little extra thing in here, Tom, and why I even myself have had to do the gymnastics on this. Some of the folks out there know that I've had technical history doing the design and build out work for a future space operation. And so let's just think hypothetically for a minute. If I was going to operate a space facility, maybe just a short distance off the Earth, or out at S2 is halfway to the moon or something, halfway to the planets, out in a solar orbit or something. If you're going to operate that, and you have hundreds of thousands, even millions, let's just say 100 years from now, and we have 1 million people living off the surface of the earth in these facilities. And how are you going to feed them? Are you planted at great expense and hassle and everything else to provide the nutrients at that location? Are you going to run the factory farms on the surface of the earth and transport that all up to them? Or is that environment cleaner up there, more manageable? And so maybe you run your own fresh food gardens. There's plenty of reasons why you could do that. It's a terrarium, if you will, and would be the cleanest food anywhere. You could control with exacting precision the environments that you were in, and flushing them and reusing them, all of the nutrient supplies, etc. In that situation, would you need to have animal proteins and fats to survive, to be healthy in your space station, just hypothetically. So are you going to run a factory farm for fertilizer with animal DNA, breaks nutrients from the surface? You just send food up. What if you're going further out? What if you're leaving the region here around Earth and you're going out to, say, Mars or something, or to some other solar system several light years away? And in the transport time, you're not going to be able to get food and supplies, and because of the weight and everything else, you don't want to lift it off and have to transport it that way, or you don't have to carry huge cargo containers for a trip that might be tens or hundreds of years, potentially generations. Are you going to pack it all up and take it with you, or are you going to recycle and run your own farms in that kind of a situation? And when you do, can you lead a healthy life as a human based solely on plant products, things that you can grow? Or is it necessary in that situation to bring along animals to concentrate the nutrients in the form of meats and fats that then are factory farmed to feed you? And by the way, to get the textures you want, the flavors you want, the quality of life that you get from having meat, are you going to run a farm operation on your space station, your space trip? Or are you going to be all plant-based? Is it necessary? Is it wise? And then you come back to, okay, so when are we going to be faced with that? I don't want to worry about that right now. What are you talking about? Well, I'm just thinking, in a futurist sense. Would it be necessary to continue the use of animals for food in your space operations going out into the future? 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 500 years from now. And if it's not necessary then, which I would propose that it isn't, when would you stop? When would it begin to be less and less attractive, with the concerns we have right now about the way the farming of the animals is occurring, some of the threats, the medications being put into the food supply through the animals, through the milk products and other things? Is it maybe as safe as it was 30, 50, 100 years ago? And on a different plane, is it necessary like it might have been then? We talked about, how advanced we are as a people, a civilization. Forget the religious side of it. Just at a technical level, will it make sense 100 years from now or 200 years from now to farm animals in order to come up with food that is good for us? Is there a spiritual side of it? God says, go dominate and do something. You need this, that, and be sure to sacrifice the animals. Okay, well, I'm a meat eater. I love it. I've had the best steaks all the way along. However, when I do the mental gymnastics about looking to the future, looking to space operations, and then I come back to Earth, and then I see all the other stuff, and I'm like, gosh, I get it. And I've been sold this all my life. I'm part of it. But when I do the mental gymnastics, is that wise? Is it necessary? What's the future look like? And then I went over to the premiere. I saw the movie about 2 years ago in an earlier phase, and reviewed it with Cameron, had an intense conversation because he grew up in a church household. Grandfather was a minister and mom was doing ministry work. And So he has an understanding of the scriptures, and we wrestled through a lot of the stuff. Not buying into it completely myself, but also understanding exactly where it came from. I just as one quick aside, in the 60s, in the late 60s, I had friends that were husband, wife, pastor team in a Lutheran church down in Dallas. And they were teaching Montessori school. And so they were pretty advanced. It's a way of teaching children that's systematic, that each thing builds on something else. When you wipe a table off, you go left to right. You teach children that at a very young age. How do you write? Left to right here in the Western system. And there's a variation of it for places like with Hebrew, you do it right to left. But so various practices build on the last practices to help children to grow a certain way. And they were vegetarian. And I'd never, ever been, it never even occurred to me that you wouldn't just go get hamburgers at the hamburger joint. And to spend a couple weeks with them and eat the way they did, and my taste buds were tuned a certain way. I've had to confront that a number of times over life and think that through again. And I have friends that have been, go to the Hippocrates Institute and spend a few weeks and change your taste buds and like that. No, we have we dominate. We're supposed to eat beef and all the other stuff, and love shrimping off the back of the boat and crab and everything else. So, no, it's our right. It's our duty. It's our whatever. With all of that said, I think even a movie like CHRISTSPIRACY, and the events of that week, and then the stuff that we're about to be presented with that we will have to address in the months and years ahead, related to sacrifices in a very visual spectacle that the whole world is going to be made aware of and have to kind of pick a lane on. And all of the various camps that will be for or against what's about to happen for various political, environmental, moral reasons that can result in financial attacks and responses, political attacks and responses, military attacks and responses. This stumbling block to the world that's about to take place. And it's around whether or not we have an obligation and duty to sacrifice animals in need. This isn't going away. As a starting place, go on the CHRISTSPIRACY site. They've got a website, and see if you can find a theater around you and go view it. And then we can have an intelligent conversation continuing on. I think it's worthwhile. I think, that they've done us a service by at least, it took the director 7 years of wrestling through this to put this presentation together. And I think that was going to be on Netflix, and Netflix did a beautiful job deciding to do this. And then there were things they wanted to not show, and the directors felt strongly that it would not have the same needed message or impact. And so they bought back the rights from Netflix, and Netflix was gentlemanly in it. They had a contract. And so now it's available in the theaters. It may end up back at Netflix at some point in time. But for this first round, these guys held their line so that they could have a message that would have some, weight to it. And I think we owe them the honor of at least listening to what they had to say. And then we'll have an intelligent conversation continuing after it. And so there you go. And that's happening this week. That shows on the 20th and the 24th. So it's a special event. So it just isn't just random in the theaters. And you get 2 shots to see it. and I would suggest that it's worth your time and effort if you want to understand what's happening in the world and world politics and these things we're going to be faced with. This movie is timely and it's relevant and it's not a waste of your time and effort. So there you go, Tom. Is that
yeah,
buttons for you?
well, thanks, Juan. That's food for thought, no pun intended, but yeah, wow, thank you.
So yes, well, and I know I droned on a bit in saying it, but I think that you got to paint this picture to understand all that's there. Anybody who didn't want the long version, I guess I just could have said, go watch the movie and there you go.
Yeah.
But I don't think you understand unless you have a little bit of the context of what's going on.
Yeah.
So,
well,
there you go, bro.
Thanks, man.
Let me know what people think and what their thoughts are. It's a conversation, and we will continue the conversation after people have seen it. I think it'll be an important conversation, and I'm looking forward to having it with folks.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'll go and try and watch it. So, yeah, good stuff. All right, buddy. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Good to see you. And
and by the way, let me just. Oops, did I lose you there?
yeah, I've got you back.
Okay. I apologize. It's just the internet is a little sketchy. I hope I came through good in the presentation there and there wasn't any sketchiness there, but there might be a little delay or something in there too. And by the way, in the course of all of that, you have the Trump comeback looming. That's where we started our conversation. The numbers are all going towards Trump. The legal arena is all going towards Trump. So in the context of all of this coming conflict in the Mideast and in the financial system and in the political stuff, you're faced with a Trump comeback. And this political moment that we're in, and even Trump is projected, you asked about Trump stating stuff like the world will go into chaos if he isn't the leader. That's what the last message that Trump gave to the world, because he was using language of flags to communicate with the world. And the last flag Trump flew on the flagstaff, which is Melania, every dress she had in sequence carried part of the message. Last message that he gave the world was the message of my book, page 71. MEGA, Make America Great Again, election 2020 is what it was all about. And so I had cubes on every page of my book and orange, and then she wore a dress with orange cubes, dark to light, mimicking what was the message in my book. And they just reinforced that here about 2 months ago when Melania was on the cover of Match magazine out of France with the cubes from a different angle. And of course, and that's actually the if you go over to my wife's website, thejennifermack.com, her store, thejennifermack.com, we've got the coin with Melania's dress with the cubes on it there and Trump, and just a lot of fun. And it's an important message. Trump's coming back. It's going to be epic. And this is the backdrop, this contest for control of the world. Is it going to be these elite clubs, or is it going to be something where America regains control of the helm of the ship of state and then counters some of this push, this farming of the people of the world that these elites intend for us? So it's a long story, but we'll have a better conversation after you guys go look at the movie, have these conversations, and we'll come back and address these things.
We will do. Melania Trump, 143, November 5th. Coming. Thanks, Juan. We'll see you soon, buddy.
bro. Talk again
Take
soon.
care. Cheers, man. Bye.